Some crimes leave hardly a trace of evidence. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no clues. Criminals may think they've got away with it. But what they don't bank on is the tools police can use. From the latest computer technology to number plate recognition and CCTV. Leading officers straight to their suspect.
Is anything in his pockets? Nothing.
Liz Jones is a technology partner with management consultant Deloitte.
There is now an awful lot of digital evidence surrounding circumstances that means that if you do something wrong, there will be evidence that demonstrates that you did something wrong. So unless you are very deliberate about planning the crime that you're going to undertake, if it's a spur-of-the-moment crime, you're much more likely to be caught.
In World War II, Jim Booth risked his life for his country. Jim was part of a secret and dangerous mission sent to spy on the beaches of Normandy, close to enemy lines, and prepare for D-Day. By any standards, he's a courageous man, but he's also modest.
Oh, no. Good morning. There are millions of people much better than me. Good heavens, there's some wonderful cases of real heroism on there. I'm not one of them. Not at all.
Jim's bravery has been recognised with several military medals. Now, aged 99, he enjoys a more sedate life at home in Taunton, Somerset. Or at least he did, until 3 o'clock one Wednesday afternoon when his doorbell rang.
I went out and I answered it, and there was a man there. He said, I'm a builder, and I wondered if I could do any work for you, because there's a slate loose up there. He said something like that.
Realising it could be a scam, Jim tried to get rid of the man.
I said, oh, sorry, no, I can't, because it's all been arranged. Thank you very much, but it's all fixed.
What happened next was shocking.
He immediately showed that he had a claw hammer in his hand. And he picked it up, and he arrived straight at me, and he started hitting me really hard, the claw side down on my head, with me retiring backwards, back into this very room. At that point, I collapsed.
The attacker stepped over Jim's body and entered his home, looking for items to steal. He then ran off, leaving Jim lying in the doorway, blood pouring from his head.
I came round, and I saw myself covered in blood and nobody else there, and I didn't know what to do.
Jim knew he needed urgent assistance. He summoned up his strength and crawled outside into the street.
In fact, I crawled across the road because I couldn't walk.
A neighbour spotted him and rushed to his aid.
And of course then they reported everything to the police and everything, and before I knew, the ambulance was here and I was back in hospital.
Jim's skull had been fractured in the attack, and he was fighting for his life in hospital. Meanwhile, his attacker was at large and needed to be found urgently. Unprovoked, violent attacks like this are rare. Detective Superintendent James Riccio is one of Avon and Somerset's most experienced detectives. Within an hour, he was heading up the investigation.
I've been a detective for over 20 years, and when I've been told an elderly gentleman's been attacked with a hammer from close range, my initial thought was that he's not going to survive. So initially, I thought, actually, this is a homicide investigation.
There were no witnesses, and at first, no obvious suspects.
It's really extremely rare for someone to be attacked on a doorstep to this level of violence. There was nothing coming from us from local information that they were being targeted. There was nothing to suggest that distraction-type burglaries were frequent in the area. It was very, very random.
The attacker had been into at least 2 of the rooms, and a debit card was among the items that had been stolen. If the card had been used, it could provide James and his team with their first lead. Police can financially track a stolen card. Working with banks and credit card companies, they can quickly plot where and when the card has been used.
One key item was his cash card. It was missing from the dining room. We done financial tracking almost immediately on Jim's account. What that revealed was actually Jim's account was used really, really quickly after the incident, and it was used in motorway services northbound on the M5, the Bridgewater services.
Over the next day, detectives continued to track Jim's card, and at each place it was used, they also checked for CCTV.
We were able to pinpoint the financial tracking where Jim's card had been used those hours after the attack and into the following day. From there, we were able to go and obtain CCTV. So very early on, we had an image.
Within 24 hours, they'd created a trail of photos plotting the attacker's movements.
And that stemmed from Bridgewater right the way up into Bermondsey.
This was their man, but they still needed his identity. An intelligence officer had been scouring police databases for reports of suspicious activity. He'd drawn a blank, but then started looking in the neighbouring force area, Devon and Cornwall.
He looked at their logs, which had been flagged for being suspicious activity. And from that, he noticed a high-risk missing person called Joseph Isaacs.
The intelligence officer then checked automatic number plate recognition cameras to see if Isaac's car had been seen in the area. The UK has a network of 11,000 ANPR cameras. They automatically read registration plates and check vehicles against police databases. If a vehicle is of interest to an investigation, police can then track back to see where it's been. Liz Jones has worked with police on upgrading their ANPR network.
The amount of data that the ANPR cameras collect is absolutely phenomenally large. And police officers have that access to data after a car is driven through a location. They're able to use that information to track the path of a car or a vehicle. They can also use it retrospectively to piece together evidence and information about what a vehicle was doing in a locality at a particular point in time.
In this case, ANPR was crucial.
Isaac's vehicle had been in the locality around the time of the attack. It hit or pinged around Taunton 2 or 3 times on that day.
Checking Isaacs against the CCTV images, it quickly became clear he was the man they were looking for. The next step was to arrest him. Officers lay in wait near his favourite McDonald's.
From the financial transactions, we were able to establish that he'd been using a McDonald's up between Burnham and West Supermare. So officers deployed to that location on the morning. We knew his vehicle, we knew his description, and actually we were able to trace him and track him from McDonald's, and he was stopped by officers as he left on the main thoroughfare out of Weston.
Was anything in his pockets? Nothing.
Police found a cheque belonging to Jim Booth in the footwell of Isaac's car. With his elderly victim still in hospital fighting for his life, Isaacs was facing a charge of attempted murder.
Okay, Joseph, I'm arresting you for the attempted murder of James Booth and aggravated burglary. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later rely on in court, and anything you do say may be given in evidence. You're under arrest, okay? Are you...
I'm not saying nothing, no, it's not me, but I'm not saying nothing to I see my lawyer because this is a joke.
Just 2 days after the attack, and Isaacs was in custody. Back at the station, he was formally interviewed.
Because of the extreme nature of the attack, you would expect some kind of trigger, some reaction. There was no reaction. There was no admission of guilt. There was no compelling answers given. It was just complete disdain and complete arrogance.
There was one final piece of forensic evidence.
When he was stopped and his clothing was seized, he had Jim's blood on his trousers.
That evidence, along with everything else, was put to Isaacs.
All those key elements we had from the scene around him were saying, actually, you were using the card of Jim Booth. The CCTV telling us you're using the card of Jim Booth, and actually you got Jim Booth's blood on your trousers. Please tell us why. And he couldn't, and he wouldn't.
After 9 days in hospital and against the odds, Jim was finally able to return home.
Jim had severe head injuries, and he also had severe defence wounds to his knuckles, broken knuckles, where he was fighting for his life. It was only Jim's character and his resilience, really, that he had the strength to crawl into the street, and when we literally crawled into the street and call for help.
After taking legal advice, Isaacs pleaded guilty to aggravated burglary, but denied attempted murder.
Potentially he would get between 10 and 14 years, but with any mitigation that could come down, and we weren't happy with that. In our minds, there was a clear intention to kill. An aggravated burglary didn't quite meet what we believed was the rightful outcome, and that for the family. So we really pushed for a prosecution trial for attempted murder.
James and his team got their way. The trial went ahead, and Isaacs was found guilty of attempted murder. He was jailed for 20 years.
It justified our decision from going from an aggravated burglary to attempt murder. We were adamant that that repeated hammer attack on a 96-year-old male was intention to kill, and the jury agreed with us.
For Jim, it's hard to comprehend why someone would subject him to such a violent attack.
I have tried to understand, actually. One wonders why on earth somebody does behave like that. Something must have happened to him. Goodness knows what.
For James Riccio, it was a combination of the work put in by his team and the use of technology that had helped solve this case so quickly.
In this investigation, technology was key. It was fundamental to a successful prosecution. The CCTV, the finance, and the database initially to flag Isaacs was key and instrumental to this investigation.
4 officers received commendations from the Chief Constable for outstanding work. As for Jim, he's again shown himself to be a courageous man.